God has specifically chosen you to be here at this time and in this place. You have incredible potential, purpose, and calling to push back the darkness and be a light for Christ. Stand for nothing and you'll fall for anything. It's time to stand your ground. This is Unapologetic. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Unapologetic. I am so excited to share today's episode with you. I'm interviewing Bill Reeves, who is the CEO of KLOVE and Access More. He has more than 30 years experience in Christian media, and he is sharing so much just wisdom about how to use media to further the gospel of Christ. He also shares with us how we can encourage our children who are more prone to pursue the arts and pursue media, and what that looks like to be a parent who is helping a child fulfill their calling, especially in those areas. You will be so encouraged by today's episode. It's really fun because it's live from National Religious Broadcasters in Nashville. I know you'll enjoy today's talk. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being with me today, Bill.
Thanks for having me. Honored to be here.
Yeah, so I'm going to start out just asking what we ask everyone,
Sure.
and that is, what do you wish Christians would stop apologizing for?
I wish they would stop apologizing for presenting truth to a world that needs it so badly.
Wow.
I see so many times that Christians, they want to soft sell, they want to hide behind an easygoing message. Mm-hmm. But what the world really needs right now is just truth. Right. And I don't think we need to apologize for owning that. Mm-hmm. I think we're made a lot of times to feel belittled for what we believe. Mm-hmm. And we don't need to feel that way. And we sure don't need to apologize for it.
Yeah. I think that's something that I so appreciate about KLOVE and all of the different ministries that y'all have is I can look online, I can look at a podcast, I can listen to the radio and feel connected to the speaker, feel connected to the singer and know, okay, we're in a joint mission. We're doing this together. And how does your company decide who to bring on, what voices you're going to help and support?
So growing up in the church like you did, you probably remember Dr. Blackaby's book, Experiencing God.
Yes.
And I think my career's just been around that principle. It's not trying to go make something happen for God. It's just paying attention to what's happening around you. Where's God moving? Mm-hmm. And that brings us to great music artists. It brings us to authors. It brings us to great filmmakers. And that just makes my life so much easier to just feel like we've just prayerfully considered what God's putting in front of us and knowing where to get behind it.
Yes. I told you I was going to save my KLOVE story till we were recording.
I want to hear the KLOVE story.
So I grew up in Wichita Falls, and we only had KLOVE. I think that's all I knew. Grew up on KLOVE, and I moved to Dallas whenever we went to First Baptist, and it was like the first email I wrote was to KLOVE, and I said, I have listened to KLOVE most of my life, and y'all are not in Dallas. And I just asked, will you please come?
Well, you know what? I have a funny story about that. Can I tell you this story? I have a funny story.
Did you answer my email?
No, I did not.
Someone did.
Someone did. That's right. We do respond.
They did.
There are a couple of key markets in the United States where KLOVE is noticeably absent.
Interesting.
And one of those is Dallas. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because there's such great Christian radio that's already there. Yes. Obviously, the station at the church, KCBI, and their station manager is a good friend, used to be my Sunday school teacher, Matt Austin. But KLTY, obviously, incredible presence there. Now, a couple of years ago, we did turn on an Air One station in Dallas, and we've had really great response to that. But you know, we're trying to propagate the gospel. We're not trying to compete with each other. Right. And so when radio is being done so well in Dallas, you don't need KLOVE, but we are all over other places of Texas. Yes. So you don't have to go far to find us.
Right. Yes. This and Unapologetics on KCBI. It's a wonderful, wonderful radio station.
Yes, they are.
It was about the first day I moved there.
Yeah,
so
I know.
I was just
you didn't have the lay of the
KLOVE.
land yet.
Yeah, I didn't know yet.
You can download the app and listen to it.
Right.
There you go.
Right, and then y'all recently launched Access More.
That's right, our podcast
so who
network.
all do you have on your podcast?
Well, we've got some great podcasters from one of your guests, Rebecca St. James. We were fortunate to partner with Paula Ferris last year, and she's brought great content. Bob Goff, Christine Kane, just, the list goes on. But some of those are ongoing series. Occasionally we'll do short series, like we just did one with our author Ken Mansfield, who was the manager for Apple Records and the Beatles in the early 70s and came to Christ and has an incredible story. And so, we do short run as well with people like Ken.
That's awesome. So I read in your bio, you had a quote that you felt like God told you that, correct me if I messed the quote up, but that TV and books and movies, that was going to be your pulpit.
That's right.
And can you just speak more to that?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was, I grew up at a small Baptist church in Central Florida, and we used to go to something called Centrifuge every year as summer camp for youth. And I ended up in a college up near the Smoky Mountains during my sophomore year. And I was just having a devotion one morning, and it just, it was one of those moments where the Lord just speaks very clearly to you. And I just knew that I was going to be a part of trying to share the gospel. Now, at 15, when you go to a Baptist church, you think you're going to be a preacher. Right. But it was about 3 years later when I saw the opportunity to use music specifically, but entertainment as a whole, to be that pulpit. And so I've been really fortunate for almost 35 years to make a living doing something that I love to do, but hopefully has some impact because of the entertainment reach.
Right. So I want to talk about this a little bit, and I've talked to different people in Christian media about this, and you asked me this before we were airing, but you always wanted to do communications, and I have since I was 5. That was something I always wanted to do. For some reason, maybe, and I don't know if this is your experience or not, it seems like media or entertainment isn't really an okay dream, quote unquote, for Christians to have. It seems it's a little, there's some prejudice against it.
Yeah.
And, I mean, why do you think that is? And then how can people who really do want to do it or feel like they want to do that and that's what God's called them to do, how can they fight against that?
That's a really great question. I think at the core of it is just simply fear. People don't understand it.
Right.
And I think the church specifically has done a pretty poor job of encouraging people to go into the arts. And examples of that are, think back to your growing up, right? When somebody wanted to go on a mission trip, what did we do? We had a blessing service. We raised money for them. We prayed over them. We heard their stories when they came home.
Right.
But what would happen if somebody said, I want to go dance on Broadway, or I want to go be a director in Hollywood? Yeah. Oh, don't do that. Don't go get a real job. Well, so what happens over 40 years when Christians don't go to those places? Those art forms degrade and our message gets lost. So for me, it's just been very much about trying to get back in that game, not sit on the sideline and throw rocks at it, but get in. And look, it's messy. It's not always easy, and there are slippery slopes. But, as I tell my kids, look, I never said it'd be easy. I just said it'd be worth it.
Right.
And so all of these times, these investments in film and books and podcasting and radio and streaming, live events, we're seeing them make an impact. We're seeing us slowly claw our way back into the entertainment forum.
Yes, it's incredible. I just think about, I can't even think of a Christian movie that was available whenever I was in high school.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's interesting because it's almost, as you see the decline in culture, my husband Ryan and I can't really almost turn any show on without feeling convicted within 5 minutes. We can't watch it.
I know.
But it's neat that even it's unfortunate with the cultural decline, but that there's so many Christian shows coming out. There's so much really quality Christian movies.
Yes, that's right.
And I think that's so encouraging.
Well, and what I'd tell you is a lot of the production companies, the book publishers, the film companies, they are recognizing very much that this is, I call it a very underserved audience. You know, they don't completely understand it, but as we start to show them that there's value in that audience, you know, you think about on the publishing side, you know, Stephen and Alex Kendrick with a #1 book called The Love Dare and 5 Love Languages, #1 on the Amazon charts. Rick Warren's Purpose Driven Life, #1. Then you go to TV and you got the Duggars, and then you had Duck Dynasty, and you had the Bible and Mark Burnett, and you had Chip and Joanna Gaines.
Yeah.
Then you look at the album side, and you got Toby and Chris Tomlin and Lecrae topping the album charts, and then the Kendricks and the Irwins topping the movie chart. This is not a fluke.
Right.
This is an audience that is deeply rooted in their faith, that wants content that affirms that and challenges them. So, you know, it's why I appreciate what you guys are doing with the ministry at your church, because you guys see the value of media, and it changes people's lives.
Absolutely, definitely. Can you? We have an art school down the street, and I talk to a lot of teenagers that go there, and it's rough. I mean, it's a rough school to be a part of, but they also want to learn their craft, and they want to excel in it, and they want to have the opportunities that come from that, of course. Can you just encourage the teenager or the young adult listening that really wants to go into this world, but you know, I mean, their parents are scared, or they're being told that they shouldn't, but that really is the desire of their heart.
Yeah, I love challenging those students, those kids, those young adults. Here's what I would say. You know, when you go to the grocery store, there's a lot of things there that are great, and when you're pushing your cart up and down the aisle, you pick those things. But there's some things that aren't great. And now, am I not going to shop in that grocery store because of those not great things, or am I going to focus on the great things? And the education process for the arts is kind of like that. There's some really messy stuff and stuff that doesn't affirm our faith. But there's a lot to the beauty of the art that does. And what I would encourage is people to really think through it that way, to go back and reclaim it. But in the process, especially as a student, make sure you surround yourself with really great people, a great church, great Bible study, because you're going to need it to really level off what's coming at you through your education process.
Yes. That's such great advice. So making sure you have people around you that can help you and that are on the same path, for sure. So we've just launched Unapologetic. It's TV, radio, podcast. I'm really, really excited. It's a part of my dad's media ministry and part of KCBI and part of our church, and it's all together, and it's really exciting. And I'm really glad that our church and the leaders of the church see the need for the next generation, and see that, I mean, they do want to be entertained, and they like content, and they like videos and all these things, and you know, it's the first post-Christian generation. They are not coming from the same viewpoint. They're not coming from the same understanding. That's even just me in my 30s grew up with. And so I'm very thankful that they've caught the vision. I know that your team has the vision for reaching this next generation. For anyone listening in media, or that they've been in media ministry, they've been in broadcasting, or just in church ministry, not just in church ministry, but forget broadcasting.
Right.
And the temptation is, well, the younger, they just need to be like us. They just need to get on board. Come on, guys.
That's right.
You just need to buck up, be more spiritually mature. What do you think the line is between calling the next generation up? I think this is my question. Calling the next generation up and making sure we're communicating in a way that reaches them to further the gospel. So
I'm going to start by answering that with the church's responsibility. and then I can talk a little bit about media.
Right.
But several years ago, my wife and I got really convicted as we would go to church, and we have 3 children, and we would go to church and we would go 5 different directions. My youngest would go to his Sunday school class, and my middle would go to his Sunday school class, and my oldest would go to her Sunday school class, and me and Heidi we may go to the same class, or we may go to a men's class. And after a period of time, we realized, you know what? There is no intergenerational transfer of wisdom. There's the young kids they're going to Sunday school class with their peers. They're not sitting in a class with someone that's 40 years old, helping them see the next phase of life. Or we weren't sitting with 70-year-olds listening to their journey as adults and parents. And so we made some tangible changes in how we worship and how we go to church, because we realized our kids aren't getting the wisdom of the life of more mature believers.
Right.
Now, how does that have to do with your question? Part of the fear that the church has with sending young people out into the world is just, frankly, they're not equipped. They're not ready. I wouldn't give my keys to my car to my 6-year-old. Why? Because they're not ready. The same has to be thought about it spiritually. And there's a whole generation of people who have a passion. I heard this said one time that arts are the new apologetic.
Wow.
And I think about that. Think about people that are, 20, 25 years old. What are they moved by? Beautiful design, beautiful art, beautiful music. So God created that.
Yeah.
He made all that.
Yeah.
But what are we afraid of? We're afraid of sending an unprepared generation out into a messy world. So I think the answer to your question really lies in how is the church going to deal with it,
Right.
not how does each individual deal with it as they have to go out into it.
That's a fantastic answer. I know I didn't really know necessarily. I've always been a part of a multi-generational church.
Yeah.
So I actually, some of the research I've been reading and looking into, because I'm starting our next gym ministry at our church, and we have Rebecca St. James. She comes once a month, and we're busy figuring all that out. I really wasn't even aware that there were churches that didn't have multi-generations. We just I haven't grown up that way.
Churches look more like schools than they look like New Testament churches.
Right. So that's neat. Even just hearing the wisdom. I tell this story about when I encourage people just to share their testimonies. I had a friend, and it was devastating what happened in their marriage, but it was a very quick divorce, and that's
very sad.
Not to, of course, no one knows the whole story except those two, but it was very quick. And I remember thinking, they haven't heard enough stories. They haven't heard enough about redemption and people working through things, and that gets lost. It gets lost if you don't hear.
Listen, we have watched so many couples' lives fall apart, and when I've been married 29 years, you go through rough patches, but I remember one time my wife telling another couple, another lady, she was going through a tough time, and she said, look, here's my advice to you. Surround yourself with godly people because they'll give you godly advice. But a lot of times divorce happens because you start to listen to these voices of people who have no relationship with the Lord.
Right.
And of course they're going to say, take the path of least resistance and what they perceive as easier. But that multi-generational wisdom can help so many times in those sort of situations.
So with the multi-generational wisdom in mind, we're at National Religious Broadcasting.
Yes, we are.
We're recording live, and it's such an honor to be here and to even get to sit in the same room with you and so many people that we have that have just done incredible work for the gospel and communications. This may be hard to sum up. Hopefully, I'm sure you can answer it. But what advice do you have? What wisdom do you have to pass on to the next generation, people that want to further the gospel through communications?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've always believed that we're all given a gift. And that obviously we're taught about spiritual gifts growing up, right?
Right.
But I think God wired all of us very uniquely. And for me, what I've always tried to teach my kids is let's figure out what that gift is. What's that passion?
Yeah.
And how do we steer you towards doing that? For me, I love doing that with people who are called to the arts.
Yeah.
I certainly have a passion for music. I certainly have a passion for film. But I love working with podcasters. I love working with dancers and painters. I love working with writers, because when we can take those gifts and steer them towards creativity for the Lord, I just think it's culture changing.
Right.
So my encouragement is, of course, always respecting the process. Respect your parents. Respect those who are trying to speak wisdom into your life. But ultimately, you got to follow what God's put on your heart to do.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to ask you this, since you're a dad, and my dad was so instrumental in making sure that I didn't let go of dreams God had given me. I told you this off air, but I started talking to my parents about things I wanted to do when I was 5.
Yeah.
And I wonder how, I'll have to ask my dad, was it hard not to roll your eyes? Was it hard to sit there and listen to me talk about it for hours?
Right.
Can you just speak to the role that parents play in speaking life into their children, helping them follow God's plan? And then also, if you will, what it does when parents don't support?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I'm the last guy on the planet to give parenting advice, because I'm still in the process. I have a beautiful 25-year-old daughter who recently got married and gave me my first grandson.
Great.
I have a wonderful 22-year-old son who is hard at work trying to figure out his life and his career. And then I still have one at home that's 16. And so I'm still in that process. But here's what I would tell you. I read a book by Max Lucado years ago called Cure for the Common Life. And he had a whole chapter in the book about that verse in Proverbs about train up a child in the way he should go when he's old, won't depart from it. And he started the chapter kind of funny. He said, as Max often does, he said, why is it that all of these people who take their kids to church and read them the Bible, why do they create such hellions for children? Like, how does that happen? How do these kids come off the rails, right? And he said, I think it's because we misunderstand that verse. And so he goes on the rest of the chapter to explain some of the original language that was used. And it was really the picture of an archer pulling back a bow and shooting an arrow. And the word in that verse that's critical is bent, that God gives us all a bent in life. And he reminded me as a parent, he said, it's not your job to write your kid's story. He said, the Lord's already done that. He said, as a parent, your job is to help them read the story.
Wow.
And find that bent.
Yeah.
So what we did with our 3 kids was just, we homeschooled the kids. We curtailed, lots of media, believe it or not. We didn't let them have a ton of it. But we really catered their education to whatever their bent was.
Nice.
Our daughter was a reader and a history person, so she spent a ton of time doing that. She did a little math, but that wasn't her passion.
Right.
Our middle son learned a lot by just experiencing. He hated the schooling process, so we didn't do as much textbook work with him. And then our last one, we call him the brains of the operation. He's really strong in things that I think will corporately get him a long way. So we cater for him on that. But all 3 of them spent time with me. They all traveled with me since I owned my own business at the time. And we let them experience life instead of just reading about it in a textbook.
Wow.
Now, we're broke because it costs so much to fly them everywhere and buy extra food and hotel rooms, but they got an experience that I think all 3 of them would say really affected them finding their bent from the Lord.
That's fantastic. I know, as more coming from the counseling side, just seeing what it does to kids when their parents don't support their dreams, or I wouldn't necessarily say crush their spirits, but that definitely does happen. And for parents who maybe just are scared.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are things to be scared of.
Of course there are. I mean, we all,
right.
and my parents were born in the 40s,
Mm-hmm.
and they were coming out of a time of depression, and there were different priorities. You got to go get your education,
Right.
you got to get your pension fund and your 401k. But I think the further we get away from that, I think there's a generation of people who are just really feeling like they need to lean into their calling more than their 401k.
Right.
And I think we as parents need to embrace that and let the Lord take care of them.
Wow. That's fantastic. Okay, so in closing, usually whoever I'm interviewing doesn't have so many different places to point people, but can you just tell us about
Sure.
how to be involved in your ministries
Sure.
and the different things that you have going on?
Absolutely. Our anchor brand is KLOVE, the KLOVE Radio Network. So you can always go to klove.com, and you can hear about the goings-ons. Like right now, we're part of Toby Mac's Hits Deep tour, and you can learn more about how to go see Toby out on the road through klove.com. You can also stream if you don't have it in your city. You can go online and listen there, or download our app. Then our Praise and Worship Network, air1.com, is also available for all the same things. You can follow our tours, and then, of course, our podcast network now that's a couple of years old, accessmore.com. You can go there and listen or download the app so you can get it on your phone and take it with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on
I'm
today.
so
I really
honored that you had me.
appreciate
Thank you for having me. Best of luck to you and your triplets. Triplets.
Yes.
That's impressive.
Who all want to be in ministry.
All right.
They're already talking about it, so I'm taking it seriously.
Yes, you should.
Yes.
Never too early.
Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Unapologetic. I think my favorite thing that Bill Reeves says is that we don't write our kids' stories. We help them read the stories that God has written for them. And if you enjoyed today's episode, I would encourage you to check out ptv.org/Joya. And remember, you can hear today's episode and more wherever you get your podcasts.